Hello, I'm Greg Sadler, and I have got something to tell you about and invite you into. So we've got a really great educational opportunity that is coming up in June, starting on June 15th. It is an online class which will be delving into one key work by one of the most important philosophers in the history of Western philosophy, sometimes called the father of modern philosophy or even modernity. Who are we talking about? Rene Descartes. And what work are we focusing on? It's going to be the Meditations on First Philosophy. You notice I got a little prop here. This is my copy that has the French and Latin. Descartes wrote it in Latin originally, and then it was translated into French. But we'll also be consulting the sort of official scholarly version found in the philosophical writings of Descartes, translating by Cottingham and his buddies. So we are going to be delving into this. Now, this is an online open enrollment synchronous class. What does that mean? Online, I think that kind of goes without saying, not too hard to figure out. Open enrollment means that anybody who wants to enroll in the class can. You don't have to be a philosophy student. You can just be a lifelong learner, a working professional, somebody who went to college, learned about Descartes, but you want to learn some more. Everybody is welcome. Even if you don't have a background in philosophy or specifically in modern philosophy and Rene Descartes, you will get a lot out of this class. I have been studying and teaching Rene Descartes' works for about 30 years. So I don't know how many students have passed through my class or how many of them I've led through the meditations, but it's probably, in the hundreds, maybe even the thousands at this point. So, you're going to be getting a lot of helpful guidance, and that comes to the synchronous part. So an online synchronous class means that we are going to meet for regular class sessions. In this case, it will be on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. And sometimes they go 90 minutes. That's what they're listed for. Sometimes we might go a little bit longer. I never go shorter than that because I want to make sure that my students certainly get their money's worth. And so what will we do during these? I'll present some material, but I also like to make it very, very interactive. So sometimes I'll raise questions or pose examples and we'll analyze those. People get to ask their own questions or, say, I'm confused about this. Can you explain this a little bit more? And we can always follow up from class session to class session. There's 8 weeks in this class, and we'll tell you why in just a bit. What do you get if you register for this class? So there's the class sessions themselves, which are carried out through Zoom. Not only do we hold those class sessions, we record them. So if you miss a class session or you'd like to go back to it later on, you can always do so. If you'd forgotten about something and you want to check on it, that is no problem whatsoever. So we've got all of that, and then I also provide some useful resources to help you make progress in studying Descartes' works. A lot of these consist in handouts that I've developed over the years for my own academic students. And there'll be other things as well, discussion forums where you can raise additional questions. We'll see about, perhaps worksheets as well. And I add links to things that may be useful for you as you study Descartes. So you get a really rich learning environment that supports you as a student. So we are going to begin on June 15th with the first class session. And the way this class is set out, it's pretty straightforward. There are 6 meditations in Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy. We're going to take each of them over the course of the first 6 weeks. Then we're going to, in the last 2 weeks of the class, look at the objections that are made by important philosophical critics of Descartes and Descartes' own responses to them. So I'd like to run you through the curriculum just a little bit, might give you an idea of what we'll be studying. So meditation 1, beginning at the beginning, Descartes is starting philosophy over by introducing a method of doubt. We call this methodological or hyperbolic doubt. What is he going to doubt? That's a lot of what we're going to be talking about. The senses, things that we receive through the senses, but also, could we be in a dream? Or how do I know I'm in real life? And then what about if mathematics and geometry and even logic doesn't work quite the way that we think that it does? Maybe God exists, maybe God doesn't exist. What would be the implications of that? And by the very end, we introduce one of the most famous ideas of Descartes, the evil demon genius, whatever you want to call it, the malingénie, who is completely devoted to using their vast powers to deceive me about anything that I think that I know. Week 2, we pick up with that evil deceiver at the beginning of meditation 2. Maybe I don't have a body. Maybe there's no external world. Maybe I don't know anything. No, I do know something. And this is where we get to the very famous Cartesian cogito, I think. But what is it to be a thinking being? What are the different modes of thought? How am I, to use another famous example, different than a piece of wax that we're going to look at? It has qualities, don't I as well? So we're going to look at the distinction between the mind and the body that plays such a massively important role within Descartes' philosophy. And this, by the way, is where a lot of people who teach Descartes' meditations, they just stop. They don't go on any further. We are going to go on further. Meditation 3 is officially about the existence of God, and Descartes is going to provide a really complex, interesting argument for God's existence. But we got to do some work to get there, and we're going to learn some important things along the way. For example, where our ideas come from and what kind of ideas we have, and this notion of clarity and distinction as a criterion for knowledge. We're going to look at innate, adventitious, and invented ideas. We'll look at the difference between what Descartes calls objective and formal reality, and then we'll get the argument for the existence of God, and we'll see what its implications would be for Cartesian philosophy. Meditation 4 is going to cover a really important topic. How is it that we screw up, and how can we stop screwing up so much? So if we know that we get some stuff wrong, enough to doubt it, how does that actually happen? How does the intellect and the will combine in judgments to lead us astray? There's also another really, really interesting feature that we're going to explore a bit. Descartes says that we, human beings, are midway or somewhere between God or absolute being and nothingness. It's not Jean-Paul Sartre who comes up with being and nothingness. That's coming out of Descartes. By the way, Sartre is, by his own admission, a Cartesian. So that's some really important stuff. Then in week 5, we're going to be looking at the mind again and what Descartes calls true and immutable natures of things and the ideas that we have of those. So we'll look at triangles, mountains and valleys, and then we'll look at God again and see whether existence is a necessary component of the idea of God, which Descartes affirms, or whether, as he suggests, there is a sophism contained here. And we'll also look at how different arguments conflicting with each other can affect the mind. In week 6, we'll be wrapping up with the meditations themselves, and we will be getting the body back, getting the world back, getting the senses back, all the things that we were doubting at the start. We'll get them back, but in a better way. So we'll be looking at the difference between the imagination and the intellect and what the senses can tell us, what nature teaches us about bodies, whether we can have confidence in external things, an external world or not. And we'll be looking at the mind-body connection and what Cartesian dualism has to offer or to deny to us. So that is the meditations. Then we got 2 more weeks left of the class. What will we be doing in those 2 weeks? Looking at the replies of Descartes to objections that get raised by critics. So Descartes had the meditation circulated around and then said, hey, is there anything wrong with this? Tell me about it. So people did tell him at significant length. We'll be looking at 4 of these sets of criticisms in week 7 and Descartes' own responses to them. One of these people you probably know, Thomas Hobbes. Then in week 8, we'll look at 3 more sets of objections, Descartes' replies to them, which include, by the way, Pierre Gassendi, who you may think of only as a scientist. He was actually an Epicurean philosopher as well. And what we'll do in week 8 is also kind of wrap up exercises, address any hanging issues that are left from the previous 7 weeks, and try to consolidate all of our learning so that people can retain it going forward. So if you're interested in some really interesting, engaging, both high-level and basic study of this really important work, if you're interested in coming away with a solid understanding, not only of Descartes' Meditations, but of some of the objections that people made to them and Descartes' own explanations and clarifications that he provided, then you probably want to consider enrolling in this class. We will offer it again in future years, but there's no time like the present, as they say. So consider joining us for this journey through Rene Descartes' Meditations and the objections and the replies.